Will you tell me some more then about, you said you were going to explain internal family systems, for example.
See, this is my internal family systems move. I'm so excited to talk to you about this. I have a sense that this is something that you might start to get into just based on some of our similar interests, but IFS therapy. Ooh, okay. So I'll take you back a bit. I've been practicing IFS for 7 years without even realizing it. So my therapist specializes in IFS, and forever she would say to me, she would explain to me that I had these different parts and that we are all multiples. Okay. And we have this idea of multiplicity, the idea that of, multiple personality disorders. It's like this shunned idea, but in fact, we all are. But someone who's just been diagnosed with multiple personality disorder just had such a severe trauma that it got so blown out so far that they've lost connection to their core self, right? But we all are functioning as multiples. We've got the little Gabby who was abused as a child. We've got the controller part of me that wants to just manage everything, right? We've got the wife Gabby who perceives herself in that way. So we've got all these different parts of ourselves, and I can break it down very simply. There's 3 parts. Okay, there's the exiled parts, and we know those exiles are like the child who was abused. The exiles are the parts of us that are so shameful that we want to do everything we can possibly do to manage them, to anesthetize those wounds, to shut them down. So then the next part is the managers, the protector parts. So the managers and protectors, for me, let's just give an example. Whenever I feel out of control, my 10-year-old child who was abused as a child, who felt out of control, who needed to stay safe, steps in, right? She wants to freak out. So instead of her stepping in, this manager, controller, I call her, starts to control everything around her and make sure everybody's doing what they need to be doing. So little Gabby doesn't have to feel that pain. That's the manager. And then the third one is the firefighter. And anyone who's an addict can recognize their firefighter. It's the part of you that's like, no way, I'm not going to feel this pain. I'm going to pick up that drink right now. And it's just that alarm system that goes off and says, hell no. Let me drink, let me work, let me check out my porn, whatever it is, boom, 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 to just shut it down. So we've got these 3 different parts, but those 3 parts have multiple different personalities that we coexist with. And then to simplify it totally, we all have a core resourced adult self. Russell, your core resource adult self is the beautiful man who took that splinter out of his child today, right? In that moment, there's nothing more than this adult man who's super resourced, super caring, compassionate, loving with his kid, caring for her, right? So one of the easiest ways to start to recognize and identify our core resource self is if you're a parent. You can be like, well, what would I say? Like, what would I say to my kid Oliver if someone shamed him? Be like, baby, you are amazing. You are magnificent. But that's not what we say to ourselves.
No.
Right? So if you start to notice yourself at any point when you're in that, child part, and then the managers are stepping in, if you then start to recognize that adult resource self is there and can start to lead these other parts as if you were the father of these other parts, right? And say to yourself, like, what would I say to my daughter right now? How would I respond to my daughter? And respond to yourself in that way. Then what happens is this is getting a lot in here, but I want to get it in. What happens is all these parts can still coexist, but they're no longer in their extreme roles. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it really does. I was just very taken with how you described that, Gabby, and like got a lot of identification from it. And I think that some of the therapy I have, notably with Bruce, who's like sort of the main therapist I deal with, he sort of uses some of that kind of terminology, but I was also struck by the obvious corollary between what you were describing and Jungian archetypes, particularly like the shamed child and like the notion of the shadow, the sort of unlived, unrealized aspects of the self, which are dark and scary, but from where power can be found if you can, get past the dragon. I suppose it's put it into a more localized and therefore perhaps more pragmatic terminology, and a sort of a personal myth rather than a kind of universal myth where you're talking about the ruler, the trickster, whatever it is. In talking, like, dealing with, I recognize, like, in myself, obviously the wounded child aspect of the self, and the kind of the set of tools and structures that I've designed in order to ensure the safety. And, like, even again from a 12-step perspective, Gabby, I remember one of the most sort of significant moments in my early recovery was when a therapist at the 12-step treatment center where I got clean said to me, "Well done, you became a drug addict. You found a way to survive. You found a way. Well done."
That is such an important point that I think you'll find a lot of relief in. And anyone who's an addict can find a lot of relief in this. There are no bad parts. So the part of you that used in whatever form, the parts of us that use in whatever form, they did their best. They did a good job, because we, in those moments in our life, could not feel that pain. We were not capable of feeling that pain. And so those parts, they had a role. But all of our recovery and all of our ability, all the work that we've been doing to get closer to our core self, whether we realize it or not, has helped us take those parts of ourselves out of the extreme roles of drug addiction and into a role where they can still coexist with us, but not in such an extreme level. And so it's so beautiful about that, is that we can say to ourselves, there's nothing, I'm grateful for just like your therapist said, like, you did a good job. You got yourself, even that was your only way of getting yourself to safety in the moment.
Yeah. And then one of my mentors still sort of uses, I guess people use the kind of terminology and linguistic systems that are appropriate for their background or whatever. But he said, like, like when I was having a challenge around, I was working on a film like last year, and he was saying, he goes, like, your emotions are like the sort of shop floor, like we don't want to do this, we ain't doing it. And, like, he goes, at some point you have to engage the CEO of yourself, who's going to go, look, we're going in this direction, we're doing it. Although there are probably some political ideas in there to do with unionization and the empowerment of workers that might not hold up to scrutiny from that perspective, although he is a working class person from Liverpool. So, there you go. But I recognise that I think most significant in what you're saying, Gabby, is the acknowledgement that there is not one distinct self that's a sort of static and unmovable entity. I heard recently from the physicist Carlo Rovelli, the theoretical physicist, that at the most basic level of reality as we currently understand it, there is no static material as such, just that all material objects are determined by relationship. This compound or this molecular entity only becomes that via its relationship with a secondary or at least different entity. I thought perhaps if this is how material reality functions at the most essential level that we can observe in ourselves too, there is a kind of mutability, a kind of plasticity, and an interrelational sort of set of possibilities, a super state of possibilities, to use a sort of a quantum physical term.
Totally. And the therapist, Richard Schwartz, who created IFS, his whole premise is that when we treat ourselves from this, so when we treat ourselves from this sort of diagnostic place of, okay, you're this one person and you have all these problems that we have to fix, it doesn't allow for the compassionate integration of all those parts. So as you start to see yourself as a multiple with just all these different parts, and you have this one core adult resource part that can be the leader and can say, you are doing a great job, but maybe you could step aside right now so that I could hear from little Russell, because he has something to say. And then, when it starts to click into place, I mean, listen, I told you I've been doing this for a long time, this practice, but recently it started to click in. It's the most mind-blowing thing on the planet. You're like, I can help myself get back to safety in the moment without picking up a drink, without raging on my team, without, having a tantrum like I'm 10. I can actually resource myself right here in this moment.
Yeah, I like that idea. All right, thanks for listening, and go over to Luminary now and subscribe. You get a real good deal. Cheers, guys.